It's finally here, NFL Draft Day, ladies and gentlemen. More evidence connecting the Browns to Jalen Milroe. Find out what it is coming up next in the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Dog Pound? I'm Spencer German, your host of the Locked On Browns podcast. I'm proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day in the land and on the road. Kevin Stefanski mentioned something that makes Jalen Milroe seem like the quarterback Cleveland really wants. Also, Joe Flacco is not here to babysit, and the best and worst draft scenarios that could play out this weekend. I'll give you mine. You're welcome to share yours with me on X at Spencito_, or you can jump in the comments section here at the Locked On Browns YouTube channel. I do want to thank you for being an everydayer with the Locked On Browns podcast and making us your first listen every single day. Remember, you can find Cleveland Browns content with Locked On Browns every week, Monday through Friday, guaranteed, plus bonus content on some weekends as well. And it's totally free to you. All you got to do is hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you listen to your podcasts. And, of course, the Locked On Browns YouTube channel. You can also get involved in the show by sharing your thoughts on anything we discussed today. This is your team. Should be part of the conversation every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs, which helps you find qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. Terms and conditions apply. And yes, Kevin Stefanski spoke to the media on the day on NFL Draft Eve on Wednesday, and he talked about the draft. He talked about the offseason program, guys being back in the building, how they're preparing for next season already, and how all that stuff starts now. But in relation to the draft conversation, there was a comment from Stefanski that stood out in my mind in relation to the Browns' potential quarterback pursuits. He was asked specifically about like what he's looking for in a potential at the quarterback position, what they're trying to sort of, what stands out to them. And he did relate this to every position that they evaluate. But I thought one key phrase that he used stood out because it points to one overarching quarterback that would make the most sense for the Browns in this class. I'm going to play the clip here, and we'll talk about it on the other side.
Well, I think you look at every position, not just quarterback. You're looking for dominant traits. You're looking for things that they're really, really good at. Because when you have that as coaches, you can play to those strengths. And then every player, every coach, every player has weaknesses or things that they're maybe not as good at or improving at. So you try to minimize those as best you can. But you certainly want to look at it from the positive lens and say, okay, what can this guy do really well and how can we use that?
So he used the phrase dominant traits there. And I like as soon as that is said, my sensors go up, right? Like I'm my antenna goes up. I'm on high alert because that points to essentially one quarterback in this class. If it's not Cam Ward, who has the strong arm and all the athleticism, who obviously we know is going number 1 overall to the Titans at this point, like the phrase dominant traits screams Jalen Milroe for obvious reasons. He's the guy who has a trait that nobody else has that sort of stands out among the rest in terms of his athleticism and his ability to, as Andrew Berry pointed out last week, which, is maybe more tea leaves or connecting the dots on their potential interest in Milroe. He said he's faster than Lamar Jackson and maybe the only quarterback with just straight up speed. Like if you're running in a straight line, that's faster than Lamar Jackson. His athleticism is the thing that makes him such a valuable asset. And someone's going to pull the trigger on him for that reason alone. It very well might be the Browns because of these and be sort of leaning on these comments that have been made in recent weeks. Listen, there's reasons, as I've pointed out, not to like Jalen Milroe. And I don't necessarily think he's going to pan out to be the easy comparison is Jalen Hurts, guy who, has some questions as a passer. I do think Jalen Hurts going to Oklahoma and getting, a year with Lincoln Riley and like that worked wonders for his draft stock because like he had the same questions about himself as a passer going into that year. And then he emerged from that, I think, a more refined passer overall. Milroe, he still has a ton of questions as a passer. And that's where I'm like, I don't know that he's going to turn out to be a great NFL quarterback. But as I've said in recent weeks, or I guess over the last week, really, if the Browns are waiting until the second round or beyond to take a quarterback anyway, you want to take the guy with the highest ceiling. And Milroe gives you that because of that athleticism that we're highlighting here. And that is his dominant trait that Kevin Stefanski sort of says they are emphasizing or that they're looking for. Now, you can question, he talks about like having a dominant trait that we know we can play to that player's strengths. You can question if the Browns have the ability to play to that strength because they just spent the last 3 years trying to construct an offense around a guy who's freakishly athletic and could do some things with his legs and do all these different designed run plays and all this different stuff. And it didn't look great. It looked awful, actually. And it was a miserable experience for everyone. So you can question if you think that they have the ability to actually tap into what Milroe's greatest strength is. And I won't push back on that at all. Like that's a fair criticism to have. And I have my doubts about that as well, which is part of the reason why I waffle on Milroe as being the guy they're actually targeting every single day, admittedly, because like on one hand, yes, he has that dominant trait and he has something that all teams would find valuable that you would hope you can sort of tap into. But at the same time, you're talking about a guy who doesn't fit the room as currently constructed. You have two pocket passers in there right now, guys who can drop back, read the field, throw the ball downfield, play action game very heavily for these guys. Like that's not Milroe's style. That's not how Milroe's going to play. And so catering your offense to a guy who's just freakishly athletic isn't necessarily something that the Browns have had success with. So I have questions about his fit, and obviously him as a passer, but and he'd be different from what the Browns have in that room right now. But at the same time, the athleticism and that dominant trait, as I keep referring to, that he has stands out among the rest of this class as exceptional. And so I don't know, like, listen, this might mean something. It might mean nothing. It might just be Kevin Stefanski sort of giving people at least some insight into the way that they sort of think and go about these things during the pre-draft process. I don't know for sure. The Browns aren't really ones for giving much away. Aside from Andrew Berry last week gushing about Travis Hunter and calling him a unicorn, it would be odd if they didn't take Travis Hunter at 2 at this point because of those comments. Like you don't sit there and call somebody a unicorn 2 weeks out from the draft and then not take them. That would just be bizarre. So along those lines, I do think that this is sort of more evidence to the idea that the Browns could be interested in or potentially be considering Jalen Milroe, but we don't know for sure that he's going to be the target and he's going to be the guy that they really go after and try to pursue here. So it's still up in the air. They could, I still believe if Shedeur Sanders falls to 33, which there's more and more chatter about that this week, that he could still very much be in play for them again. And that one for me goes back to fit. He is the perfect fit for the Kevin Stefanski offense. And he will be part of, as we talk about best and worst NFL draft scenarios for me, he'll be part of one of those outcomes that could potentially play out on Thursday night or into Friday night or just in draft weekend in general. So we'll talk about that. But Milroe, the undeniable athleticism is something that obviously can't be ignored and is obviously something that the Browns could be really placing a high value on, considering how they have seemed to lean on this idea that they want to find something that really sticks or stands out about a guy and lean on that thing. Milroe has that thing. It's his ability to create with his legs, be this world-class athlete, and maybe that's what they're looking for to sort of diversify the quarterback room a little bit. We'll see. But that stood out to me from Kevin Stefanski's comments here just one day before the NFL draft, which is obviously tonight. Now, that also brings us to Joe Flacco, who spoke on Wednesday as well, leading up to the draft. And he made it very clear. Joe Flacco is not here to be a babysitter. I'll explain what I mean coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. Do you ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. I know I do all the time. I am constantly going to the store, running errands, going out to eat with my wife, whatever it might be, and then not necessarily having the time to go in and see where my bank account's at. That's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you can just stop worrying about managing your money and start building wealth. Take advantage of the all-in-one convenience. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track, share, and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's right, half off your first year. It's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL. There's nothing quite like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment, it all feels huge. It's electric in the arena. And with Game Time, you can be part of the action without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Game Time makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when demand is sky high. Prices on the app actually go down as tip-off gets closer, and their last-minute deals can save you up to 60%. Last year, I used Game Time for the first time. I bought tickets to see Ohio State, Michigan. And yes, the result was disappointing. But my wife and I get to look back and say, we got to see the national championship Ohio State Buckeyes in person. And that was the game that kind of fueled their run in the end. I enjoyed my Game Time app experience so much that it's now become my go-to app for buying tickets. And I just bought tickets to a concert for my wife for her birthday this fall. Last minute deals. Save up to 60% off, but last minute tickets to sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. The lowest price is guaranteed means I never have to worry about overpaying. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets. Download the Game Time app. Create an account. Use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. So Joe Flacco also spoke on Wednesday on NFL Draft Eve for the first time since re-signing with the Cleveland Browns this offseason. And he had some interesting thoughts and comments just on his role here in Cleveland and how he's looking forward to the opportunity to compete and how that competition might include or is likely to include a rookie that the Browns draft this weekend. And so I think when Flacco signed, it was viewed from a number of angles as a positive thing. The obvious being, well, look, this city loves Joe Flacco. He led them to the playoffs in 2023, went on that remarkable run over 5 games, goes 4-1, throws for 300 yards a bunch of times, puts up these big numbers. And then it ended poorly in the playoffs, but it was still this wild ride, and everybody sort of rallied around him and fell in love with this new, kid on the block in Flacco. I guess he's not a kid anymore, but this guy who had just arrived in a very short amount of time. It was like this love affair over the course of like a month. And it was a fun sort of sports storyline to be caught up in here in Cleveland. So I understand all that. That's the first part of why Flacco made sense. But the other part was everyone looked and said, look, he's 41. He's a veteran in this league. He's the perfect guy to sort of bridge the gap to a rookie quarterback, whoever that may be, this year, next year, whatever the Browns' plans are for finding a franchise guy. He can sort of bridge that gap, be a mentor, sort of nurture that player. And Flacco sees it differently. He sort of set the record straight on the whole mentorship thing from his perspective as a guy who's a veteran in this league, coming into a situation where the Browns obviously are going to take a young quarterback and likely going to be pivoting to a young quarterback at some point. He knows he's got more years of football behind him than in front of him at this point in his career, so he gets that. But I thought it was interesting what he had to say about being a mentor and why he doesn't view it as something that he has to like take upon himself wholeheartedly to do. Here are his comments from that press conference.
Listen, it's such a weird question to ask, and you kind of get in trouble no matter how you answer it. I don't think anybody ever really views themselves as a mentor solely as a mentor. I think we all want to go out there and compete and play. I think if you're in the quarterback room for a day or two, you can probably understand that things like that naturally come up. I've played a lot of football, and I have a lot of different experiences, and there's a certain way that I see it, and there's a certain way I can talk about footwork and reads and those things, and I think they naturally come up. And I think when you just have a competitive, good quarterback room, you don't really have to worry about being a mentor. You just you do you, and you compete, and you have fun, and conversations come up, and everybody learns from it. and I'm not immune to that either. Like, I still have things to learn, and you can get somebody else's perspective on maybe one or two plays here or there, and it can help you it can help how you read it, and it can help how quickly you diagnose things with that specific play. So I think everybody kind of plays off of each other in that room.
So I think those comments will catch people's attention because it's him sort of saying, listen, I'm not here to play mentor. Like, I'm here to try to win this starting job and compete and be the starting quarterback of the Cleveland Browns. And I think there are some people who viewed him that way. But I also think, like, there's nothing really wrong with anything that he had to say in that press conference setting. Like, him basically saying, listen, I'm not here to do this one thing. I have bigger plans. I want to start. Like, those are all things that you want your starting quarterback or your potential starting quarterback to say, right? Like, I'm here to compete. I want to win the job. You don't want him to just roll over and be like, yeah, I'm here to be a mentor, and that's it. So I think that's fair. I also think, like, as he got deeper and deeper into his answer, it wasn't so much that he doesn't want to nurture a young quarterback. Now, he has said on other platforms and spaces that he believes young quarterbacks do need to sit for a year. So he's made that very clear that he doesn't necessarily think he should be like superseded or that a young rookie quarterback should start immediately. So I do think that's interesting. But his explanation of how the mentorship process or the mentorship concept sort of works, I think is sound. The idea that, like, most NFL players aren't going to come in and be like, yeah, I'm here to just be a mentor and put on a happy face. Like, that's not really how it works in pro sports. Like, these guys are competitors. They want to be playing. They want to be starting, obviously. But you can still leave room for that to happen naturally, I think, was his overarching point here. This idea that if you have a good quarterback room, if you have a competitive quarterback room, if you're going through a competition, the way the Browns are likely to go through a competition here in the coming months leading up to the season, that kind of just breeds mentorship all on its own. And I do think he kind of put the onus on the player. And Kevin Stefanski said he had some comments on this as well that I thought were also interesting, just in regards to how the player that they draft, like a young quarterback, it's on them to sort of come in and be a sponge and absorb as much as possible and ask questions. And I think Kevin Stefanski used the phrase, like, attach themselves to a certain player, not literally, but just, following them around, seeing how they work, seeing what they do, and not being afraid to ask questions. And so I think that's I think that's the role I think Flacco can play. I don't think Flacco's the kind of guy who, this isn't going to be like an Aaron Rodgers, Brett Favre situation where Brett Favre's just like, I'm not disclosing anything. Sorry. It's like Flacco seems willing to talk to a young quarterback and share his experiences and share what he has seen and give some insight in that way. But I do think that it's not just going to be like him sitting there like, hey, come on over to, like, he's not going to like go out of his way necessarily to do it. But as it kind of plays out and happens in the setting of the quarterback room and in the setting of an NFL season, as that rookie sort of learns and goes through year one, that's, I think, what he's alluding to, is this idea that he will be there when needed and as things go, but it's not going to be something that he's like focused on doing for a young quarterback necessarily. And I can respect that. I can understand that. But I do think his comments at least put to bed this narrative that, like, this is perfect. Joe Flacco is going to come here and mentor a young guy, pass the baton, and be on his way. Like, he doesn't view that as his role or as his job. He is not a coach. He is coming here to compete and play football, be the starting quarterback of the Cleveland Browns. And if along the way he can instill some knowledge in a young quarterback, he's going to do he'll do his best to, be a good soldier and do that, but it's not his primary focus. And that actually makes a lot of sense from a standpoint of like his perspective as to why he also signed with the Browns in the first place. The best and the worst potential NFL draft outcomes that could play out for the Browns this weekend. I'll give you mine when we come back on the Locked On Browns podcast. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5 o'clock. Your business is always on your mind, which means when it's time to hire, you need a partner who works just as hard as you do. That's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. LinkedIn's new feature, Post Your Job, can help you write job descriptions and then quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And here's a pro tip. Use the hashtag hiring frame on your profile picture to double your reach to qualified candidates. It's no wonder 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn helps them find high quality hires. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, it's draft night. It's going to be here before we know it. The Browns are likely going to take Travis Hunter at number 2 overall, and that is a good start to what could be, I think, my best draft outcome or scenario this weekend. By the way, share yours in the comments here at the Locked On Browns YouTube channel, or you can always hit me up on Twitter at Spencito_. Let me know what your best and worst scenarios that could play out in the draft could be. I'm fascinated to hear your perspective on this as well, and the guys that you really have an eye for. There's a number of players that I think Browns fans have been crushing on this entire process. Quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, defensive play, all across the board. And so I'm fascinated to hear what your answers will be to this question. But I'll start with my best scenario. Should I start with the best or should I start with the worst? We want to end on a positive. Do we want to end on? I think I'm going to start with the positive. We'll go positive first. My best scenario or outcome is simple. If they come away with Hunter and Shedeur Sanders, and it plays out where he falls to 33 and you get him, I mean, my God, I'm all in. Like, I can't possibly be more excited about a season with 2 young rookie, stars in the making than if they get Hunter and Sanders. I know there's going to be pushback from you listening to this right now. So, you might be somebody who hates Shedeur, doesn't want him, doesn't want to touch him with a 10-foot pole. I can understand that. I've been on this train for a while. I'm sure you're rolling your eyes hearing me talk about it again because I have been banging the drum for Shedeur Sanders. But this might be my last chance to ever do that because he might not be a Cleveland Brown when this weekend's done. So I'm doing it here in this space one last time. I just think those 2 players together can make some really great things happen and be stars in this league and turn the Browns into take the Browns into a different trajectory than they've been in franchise history. Again, it's a fit thing with Sanders. I think he's perfect for Kevin Stefanski's offense. He does the things that they want to do. I understand there's probably a ceiling to like his floor might be that he's never going to be worse than like the 20th quarterback in the NFL. But his ceiling might be like he's, Bo Nix. I guess the jury's still out on Bo Nix, but like the ceiling might be like he could get to like a fringe top 10 guy and that'd be it. Is that enough for you? And I say I get where you want to shoot for the stars and get that franchise guy. That's harder to do, though, than it looks. I mean, look how long it's taken the Browns all these years trying to nail that pick and find a true bona fide franchise quarterback who just is in the ilk of Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen and just takes the league by storm and is winning MVPs. Like, it's not an easy needle to thread. And so I know we can all look ahead the next year and be like, they'll find the guy next year. We've been here in Cleveland. That's been the conversation for decades now, that they're going to find the guy in the next class. Like, we don't have any guarantees of that. So if his ceiling is going to be like a fringe top 10 guy, I can get behind that. Like I can support that as a quarterback, and you can win a lot of football games and make some noise in the playoffs and do some nice things with that style of quarterback, and feel good about it. So I like Shedeur. I think it's probably a safer pick, especially with who's currently sort of running things and the regime that you have and the system that you're running, all of that to take Shedeur Sanders. But I also, like I said earlier in the show, can see where you bank on a massively exceptional trait that a guy might have, i.e. Jalen Milroe and his ability to run and be athletic and use his athleticism as a weapon. So it feels like they're not going to maybe go that route, but I'd be stunned if Sanders falls to 33 and they don't pull the trigger unless they really like Milroe that much more. But if that's what happens, I'd absolutely run to the podium, and I'd be thrilled if they came away with Hunter and Sanders in the same draft. I also need, along those lines, I need a running back in that group as well, because I've talked about it ad nauseum. Aside from quarterback, I think running back is the most important this team has right now. They don't have really anybody in that room. They haven't addressed it at all with anyone, and they need a frontline guy to sort of take the reins and be the head of that group. So taking somebody in the first, I think, 3 to 4 rounds makes a ton of sense. And they need to identify that player. And so that best scenario also needs to have a running back involved at some point. My worst case scenario, I think this one's kind of simple for me too. I've been banging the drum for offense, 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 offense. 5 out of 14 picks in the first 3 rounds through Andrew Berry's first 5 years here in Cleveland. And I know there's the context of they didn't have first round picks several years in a row, but understanding that they haven't used a lot of draft capital on offense during Andrew Berry's tenure, it's time to replenish the cupboards here. It's time to replenish some of these skill positions and get certain, address some of these bigger needs that you have on offense. The offense was inept last year. Most of your problems are on the offensive side of the ball. And here's the other thing. The defense is respectable enough at this point that you could throw them out there tomorrow and they'd be competitive as currently constructed. They might not be like the 2023 historically great team, but they can still be competitive and hold their own. You need to balance the scales a little bit and sway things back the other direction where it's like, okay, now we have an offense that can at least give our defense a chance to win some of these football games with the talent that they have on that side of the ball. So I'm going offensive heavy. And so my worst case scenario is if the Browns don't use 3 of these top 4 100 picks that they have on offense, then I think something went terribly wrong with this draft. I understand that you're always going to sort of put value ahead of other things, but the needs of this team are obvious. And if you're waiting until obviously they have that for the 4th round pick at 104, that's their 5th pick that they'll make. And I can understand where you even take an offensive, maybe you wait and you take an offensive player there. Harold Fannin Jr. could still be somebody who's there at that stage of the draft if you're trying to go tight end. So I know there's some names that'll make some sense. My last mock, I had Damian Martinez out of Miami be the pick there. So you get a running back and some good value there. I'm not saying you can't find offense there as well, but these first 5 picks through 104 should be offensive heavy. 3 to 4 of the first ones, 4 to 5 of the picks up until 104 should be offense, in my opinion. And if you have a split or something like that, I'm going to start to question how this team is kind of building out the roster. And I'm just going to assume that the offense is going to be it's going to be a rough year offensively yet again. I think that's banking too much on Joe Flacco is going to reclaim what he did in 2023, or Kenny Pickett's going to become something, or this rookie's going to really break out that they take. And I don't know that I can bank on those things. So I want to see a lot of offense taken in the first 2 days of this draft for the Browns. It's about time they did it. I think we'll be pleasantly surprised. We know Travis Hunter, assuming he's the pick at 2, which is the pretty clear assumption at this point. We know Travis Hunter will be an offensive player that they add. What happens from there is where I think the interesting part will sort of the interesting questions kind of begin. So those are my best and worst case scenarios for the first couple nights of the NFL draft, but draft weekend as a whole. What are your best case and worst case outcomes for the Cleveland Browns this weekend over the course of the next 3 days? This episode's in the books, and I'm excited about closing the door on pre-draft talk and pivoting now to being able to talk ad nauseum about actual tangible players that are joining this team in the coming days. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to have a ton of stuff for you content-wise, so be sure to be locked in at this channel. Hit subscribe if you haven't done so already, both wherever you get your podcasts and right here if you're watching via the Locked On Browns YouTube channel, because I'm going to be throwing out shorts when players get taken. I'm going to be throwing out, emergency episodes. I'm assuming here, but after Travis Hunter gets taken at 2, I'll do a quick 20-minute episode for you that I'll drop here on the channel. So there's going to be so much content rolling your way this weekend. You're going to want to be locked in. You're going to want to get everything. So please do not miss a thing right here with the Locked On Browns podcast, but also just across the Locked On network in general. We appreciate you being an everydayer with the Locked On Podcast Network. Cleveland, I'm excited to talk to you again really, really soon here in the coming days, as soon as tonight when the pick is in at number 2. Take care of yourselves. Enjoy the draft, and we'll talk soon, Cleveland.